This is the Human AI Experience, a space for creative minds shaping the future, empowering you with the right tools, insights, and real-world stories to harness AI and elevate your creative work.
On today's show, we have a special guest, Bruno Cisco. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Cisco. I am Brazilian. I'm a senior creative and also senior copywriter. I've been working on this market for like 13 years, roughly. Back in Brazil, I used to work with the brands such as Instagram, Umbro, Film, Pharma, like all these brands. Since 2021, I've been working in Amsterdam. So I'm based in Amsterdam, working both like in companies, like inside of companies, but also working as a freelance for Europe in general. I am glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Danny.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So, let's just talk a little bit about your global journey, let's say. So, can you tell us a little bit about going from Brazil to Europe? Do you feel that that shaped your creative perspective somehow?
Back from the basics, yeah, I'm from Porto Alegre, which is a city in South Brazil. And yeah, I think like since the beginning as a creative, I didn't have like much desire to move to São Paulo, which is let's say the main city for advertising in Brazil. I love São Paulo, but I cannot like imagine like living there. So I was like, okay, I have to have a plan in that sense, but also I had like other, let's say, desires in my career. So one of those was to move abroad eventually. So of course, like you have like this long way to fulfill. So when it comes to the language, of course, to be like more fluent in that, I am a copywriter, which means I have to be an excellent level of English, at least like written. So that was something I was also considering. So I started in Porto Alegre, working with these brands I mentioned. But then eventually in 2019, I started working for Hogarth, which is a company from the WPP group. And then to my surprise, they were working with the global brands in Porto Alegre, which was not, yeah, I was not expecting that. So yeah, as I mentioned, I work with Instagram, Leo Pharma. We also had Jameson, we had Nestle, like all these brands working in Porto Alegre, which was cool. But also like Hogarth has these digital hub in Porto Alegre, which they provide like services such as VR and AR deliveries, also like pretty much like all things tech they do there. So I was like, okay, since I have like these strong, let's say, experience with tech, not tech companies at the time, but with tech environments, and I wanted to, of course, like move abroad, but also like working with international clients. So I was like, okay, that's the great opportunity for me. So I started doing that. I started leveling up like my own skills. But then like I think it was of course I'm just telling about my whole plan, but also I saw like big differences at that time when it comes to see creativity, not only in Brazil, of course, but also like abroad. So one of the things I started like to realizing at that time was that the Brazilian market is quite different when it comes to approach creativity. So we are like well known like because of our creatives and because of our campaigns, but there's like a specific way to do things in Brazil, which is for me, I think it's more like focusing more like on a culture, having like this witness embedded into it, and then working abroad brought me like another perspective to that. Sorry, which was to be more pragmatic, to like put like craft in second, etc. So I think that's, let's say, that helped me to shape like my, of course, my perspective, because to my understanding at the time, I think it was like pretty much craft, pretty much like doing things, let's say, with this kind of like sauce into it. And then when I moved abroad, when I started like working here, I saw that there's also like, let's say, these more straightforward approach. That's so it's quite interesting to have yeah, this perspective, because you can just play around depending on the brief or depending on the situation. So this is, yeah, these are the things, both like scenarios taught me.
I think Brazil is quite an interesting beast in terms of creativity, right? We're like we also have when I moved here as well, I actually my first 2 years were in advertising as well, and then it's just different. The pacing for me, the pacing was the biggest
Yeah.
difference. Things move a lot slower, and then they have a lot more budget than we have in Brazil. I mean, of course, it depends. If you are in São Paulo, like you mentioned, like yes, they have the biggest budgets that you can get in Brazil in general. But as you move to regional markets, it's just different, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you have like different budgets, but also I don't know. I feel that at least like in Brazil, we have an approach where we cannot waste the timing of things. So, for instance, especially like now with social media, not now because yeah, social media is quite old, but nowadays you have to grasp to grab like the timing, otherwise you just lose an idea. Whereas like here, I think it's more, let's say you have like more steps of approval, I feel, but also you have to be more, yeah, to be more like pragmatic. So probably your messaging will be more, yeah, without any salts. You can play around with words and etc depending on the market. So I think like UK is the best example for that. But I think yeah, like outside of UK, I think things are more like you have too much steps, so you have to make sure that you play safe. Otherwise, that will come back to you, and then you have to create something and then wait for another 6 months. So I think I see that coming quite a lot.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm actually quite curious, like in regards to you being a copywriter, right? And of course, a creative director as well. But like in regards to AI, right? Because I think one of the first things that I've seen is that it's highly disrupting copy, like or copywriting, because especially like I'm gonna mention more on the product design level, but like a lot of UX copywriting, which is basically how you do warnings.
Mhm.
Let's say if you are on a digital interface and you click a button and then something is supposed to happen and it doesn't happen, then you get a warning. The copy that goes there is usually it's called UX copywriting, so experience
Yeah.
copywriting,
Yeah.
very tailored to these digital interfaces. But I guess copy in general, right? Because ChatGPT came along and then all of a sudden it can refine whatever you write. I just want your perspective. Did you see your craft or your field of expertise being disrupted by AI? How you handling that, and
Mhm.
how you kind of like using it at your own advantage? Can you just uh, give us a little bit of your perspective on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, actually, I am a early adopter of AI because I started like doing that in 2020. So I was at Hogarth, and at some like in some random day, a colleague of mine sent me a link to a tool called Quillbot. And then I started like digging into that because that regards like to copy, of course. And then I was just like shocked because I didn't know like any tool like that before. Because for those of you who don't know, like Quillbot is pretty much what you currently have on the on AI for iPhone and Mac OS. So you can proofread, but also you can change like the tone of your copy. So at the time, I think Quillbot had or still have, let's say, more professional, more concise, more friendly, like the same we have for all the tools nowadays. But then the way like the tool was doing that was quite interesting to me because not only they changed like the copy accordingly, but also they explain it a little bit like, okay, we're changing because this word suits better, etc. So at that time, and that was a specific and particular time of my life because I started like officially working, or at least like being paid for like English copy in 2019 when I joined this company. So yeah, as you can imagine, my English was not like exceptional at the time. So I had to learn like very fast, like grammar rules and how to create like this hierarchy of things in copy, especially for UX. I think that's pretty much important. So I was like, okay, I have a tool that kind of like solves my life, but it's also like my role to understand like how this tool is operating, and more of that's how can I kind of like master this tool and understand like the logic behind so I can use that myself. So, and then of course, like I had, not only I had like this compromise of learning English in a fast pace, but also to make it things like more fluid and more natural. So more, even they like to say this word, like more native. So I think that too helped me quite a lot at that time. So helped me like to understand English and also like to understand how to work along with these tools, because that's, for me, that's something that's really important. So you, of course, nowadays you have like all these platforms like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, so they can pretty much like do your job, but at the same time, it's not like your voice and it's not like your way of doing things. It's like the way the tool understands like the problem and then create this correlation between words, which is quite strange. I'm not sure like if like everyone listening to us is familiar, but basically like the way ChatGPT does things is like picking one word and then finding like the next word, like the more like close words to solve that problem, and then the next word and then the next word. So that's the way like it operates in copywriting. So yeah, I think nowadays I'm very familiar with all these tools, but quite the same use I have with that is the same. So I use these tools as a sidekick and not like something that would just do my work entirely. And especially like nowadays, because we're like so much like kind of like into this AI slop. And specifically for copywriting, I think like the way these machines were trained, I think it's pretty much like Shakespearean kind of style. So yeah, I think it's quite a bummer. I think like it's also, it's not only not natural, like because like no one speaks like ChatGPT, to be honest, and especially like when it comes to UX writing and when it comes to copywriting. So things should be more simple than that. But also like this Shakespearean like kind of style is bending the reality in a way that's and I see like like tons of copywriters kind of like doubting themselves because they're seeing that ChatGPT is presenting something better, but it's not actually better. It's just like a different style of things and different way of doing things. But then of course, like since like clients are like adopting this, and since like the industry is adopting this, it creates this feeling that ChatGPT writes best than us, which is not true at all. So I tend to be very like I'm very curious about the technologies in general, but I tend to be very pragmatic in that sense to, okay, I will just use that, but I have to have in mind that I am the final word. I am the final writer. I have to take the decisions from there and then deliver like what I think is the best and not what the machine thinks it's is the best.
Yeah,
So
I think
I
you.
think it's a very like divided like relationship I have.
Yeah, what you're saying is like you're pointing out something that we've been basically hammering in this podcast since we started, that there's this whole hype around, you creative jobs being replaced by AI, but that's just not the truth, right? Because it's
Yeah.
AI is not creative. It's good at executing. Maybe it can help you, give you some ideas, but the way I use it, at least I have, everything that it writes for me, it's heavily edited by me afterwards, because it's just not, it sometimes it just doesn't understand what you're trying to say, so you have to explain it several times, and then, or it uses some words that you wouldn't normally use, so we just remove that, and then just, so I guess we're moving into a position where we're more curators, right? You're like
Yeah, absolutely.
curating the content, and without a lot of expertise and understanding of what you're doing, you cannot curate. So you have to have
Yeah.
that experience. You have to have those things. So basically, what you're pointing out is exactly what we believe as well.
Yeah.
That Hi, if you're enjoying this episode, if this podcast has sparked something in you, made you think differently, or simply kept you company today, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. It doesn't cost anything, but it means the world to us. Your support helps us reach more people and continue investing in content that inspires, informs, and gives it back to you. We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's for me it's one of the biggest like changes in the industry because of course we still need like the specialists, so we need let's say copywriters, devs, front ends, back ends, whatever. But we have to refine better our own taste on things like regarding of course these matters. So like the copywriters can be like good copywriters, can write well, but they have to have a good taste on copywriting in a sense that if they just see something, they will say, okay, this is good, or like this is not good, and why this is not good. So I think like the editor, let's say, role for me, it sounds really best. Not only because I'm a senior, so I'm more like editor. Oftentimes when I have like I'm working with a team of junior copywriters, so I have to edit those. But I think yeah, I think like it same goes like to designing, and same goes to like every other role who's like being threatened by AI. So you have to make like better editions on things. I think that's the standard. Probably like these will become like our professions like in 5 years tops.
The way I see things from in different fields, right, is that um, the like for example, if you are creating something, if you have that experience, you're already an advantage because you know what you want. You have in your mind,
Yeah.
you're already visualized more or less what kind of direction you want to go. So if you know how to brief AI on which direction to go and what exactly you want, then you're already in an advantage. Like it even though it's good for experimentation, but when I use for creative output is just since I know what I want, it's really easy to brief and then get to a close to a result that I'm happy with.
Mhm.
If but you need to know what you want, right? It's you need to have that expertise to also judge this doesn't make sense for the brand. This doesn't allow this is not allowed by the tone of voice of the brand. This kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I want to dive in a little bit deeper on the post that you did on LinkedIn because I think we need to be a lot more critical of these technologies. And I really like the way you criticize the ChatGPT campaign. But of course, we need to give it context, right? Can you just explain a little bit the post that you did in regards to the ChatGPT's campaign?
Yeah. No, sure.
And yeah, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. So yeah, basically I wrote on LinkedIn. I've been very active on LinkedIn, just to like share some thoughts. So this was pretty much based on the new campaign for ChatGPT, so the brand ChatGPT, where they are using kind of like all the analog technologies possible for the campaign. So they're using 35 millimeter film, so like real film. They're using, of course, like actors, like the casting. Yeah, as I mentioned, was like pretty much real casting, like clothing, etc. So scenarios, everything is just real. And in this campaign, they're kind of like showing to the audience like what are the situations you can use ChatGPT. So, for instance, you can use ChatGPT to discover how to bake a cake or like how to fix a car. These situations where, yeah, I think, yeah, and probably you agree with that. I think these are pretty much useful situations like for ChatGPT. So, and then of course, like the whole conundrum of this discussion is okay, but it's just like okay, why ChatGPT is not like using AI for this thing? And yeah, it just occurred to me that to be honest, for me it's not a shock not having AI on the campaign for several reasons. So I'm pretty much like this. The post was to disclose these reasons. And then at some point, my whole theory is that all the brands wanted to look like expensive. So
Can you
yeah,
elaborate? What do you mean
yeah,
by
of course.
looking expensive?
Yeah, it seems that they want to be like filthy richy or something, but it's yeah, I think like for me, it's just like looking expensive primarily is to have a great production behind it. So as I mentioned, having like these kind of like tastes on how to film that, like the casting, the even like the situations, the script, like everything is well thought. So you can see that you have like either like a great partner production behind it or like a agency behind it. I still don't know, and I didn't go through to that. So you can see you have like people thinking behind it. So it's quite sad, but nowadays it feels that this is like looking expensive, like when you have humans working behind it, but that's reality. But I think like from a messaging perspective, there's like some ways I understand there's like looking expensive. So one of those is like the messaging. So for instance, you have like different ways to approach this campaign. You have, let's say, more straightforward or like creating these like false statements or at least like these statements where you can question like, is this actually true? So they could simply come up with something like, yeah, that's the best like AI tool in the world, but you can still like questioning like something. So instead of they prefer like to do something that is more subtle and just showing like the examples on how to use the platform. So for me also like this looking expensive like goes like like for this situation as well. So it's yeah, it's well crafted in general also like for messaging. But yeah, I think again, what they're doing, I think they have like reasons to do that. So I can kind of like flesh out like the reasons why they're doing that. First of all, I think they're doing because of the brand. So they want to solidify like ChatGPT as a nice brand, and you can see like this across like all the touch points. So from the website to the company website, even like to the some Altman posts, you can see that he's sounding natural. So he's sounding like a little bit more human. So you have like this concern about that. I also think that they're doing this for the, let's say, the investors and shareholders. So imagine that like these companies, they are in the brink of being bankrupt very easily. So ChatGPT, they even like said like this, I don't know, like last year, they're just like losing money. They're still like investing. They didn't find like the proper way to charge people in order to like be profitable. So they have to be bold in this, let's say, this statement that okay, we're like this company displaying like this quality, and we have to also do this for shareholders so they can be like, okay, I'm fine with this company. I'm like pretty sure they'll like grow. But I think these are like the main reasons I see this happening. And then it's yeah, we can like debate about like of course like the campaign per se, but I think it's also, I don't know you, but I see this kind of like a way to also mask like the product as a whole, because yeah, ChatGPT, although like it's a very nice tool, I use that every day, but like we still have this sense that tool is not final yet, right? So sometimes it hallucinates, sometimes yeah, you don't get like results what you're expecting. And then like by the fact you're just putting out like these campaigns pretty much like to say, okay, not only we want to make sure that the branding is fine and also like the investors are fine, but also like they're kind of like masking like the usage of products, which for me is a great statement to say, okay, this is not final yet, so we won't use the products like on a screen, because otherwise it would just like sound like a completely lie. So yeah,
So
I
the
think that's
yeah, sorry.
oh, I think that's the way I see those decisions. But then again, it's just like assumptions based on my own experience, like with these with brands and also like with production. So and yeah, if you come like from the advertising, you know that sometimes you have like meetings and meetings to discuss like a person like holding like a cell phone and then the screen. So what should we display on that screen? So I imagine that they had like tons of these discussions, but I think like maybe like not displaying the products, and especially like for tech companies, I think it had like a very strong reason behind it. And I think it's probably because ChatGPT is not something that is ready yet.
Yeah, I think they took, and we can of course link to the campaign in the show notes. But like they took a more conceptual approach, right, to the product itself, which
Yep.
is, I would assume it is also hard to sell a product that is basically a chatbot, right? It's so hard to just put a, it will be just the famous interface of a chat, which is an empty space with a
Yep.
button for you to input your text, which is, it's kind of hard to, yeah, to make that uh, as a product. So they took deliberately more conceptual approach, which makes sense. But I just think it's interesting that an AI company is taking an analog and traditional branding campaign. So
Mhm.
it's and why they didn't choose to use their own tools, let's say, to do this, right? It's funny, and it's just interesting to see that in the end. And I think this is something that I talk a lot about AI in general. I think there's a risk of you overusing AI without editing, without adding your personality, your brand personality, or what like adding your voice into that. Is that it's
Mhm.
just gonna standardize everything, right? Everything is gonna be this more or less of the same.
Yep.
So there's with increase of usage of this kind of tools, we will definitely need more and more brand differentiation, basically,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So how do you actually make your brand stand out? And this is one way. We know that this is the way, right? Your brand needs to communicate differently, it needs to look different, it needs to have its own voice, right? And if you use AI but for the sake of using AI, you're diluting that. So
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And also, yeah, I think like when it comes to use for brands, you have like multiple ways to do that. From my experience, also, I use like AI also to create the campaigns, like not only like for the copywriting, but also like for visuals. And one of the things I think it's pretty much like to fall into is to not knowing what you want, and then you ask ChatGPT or ask like a Midjourney, and then the first three results you just think, yeah, this is perfect, and then use that. So for me, that's the main mistake. And I think like usually like people don't realize that they have to have an idea of what they want first on things, on everything, and then go to the tool, and not like the other way around. So it also goes like to even like you can name like every tool like available, even like Photoshop. You cannot like open up your Photoshop and start like doodling without having like a sense of what you want. So, and I understand that this is quite easy to fall into with ChatGPT, because ChatGPT and Midjourney and all these tools, they will pretty much like just spit it out like several like ideas for you, and then you can actually choose. But I think like the logic's it's quite the same. So it's like a machine, kind of like understanding patterns and then just throwing at you. So we have to, and I think that's a like the perfect stage for us to think about that. So we have to understand what we want first, and then like go to the machine, and not like asking the machine to think for us. Because yeah, and also yeah, this has like several implicances, from let's say people getting dumped like because of ChatGPT, to even like these AI slop that's occurring. For me that's symptomatic, because yeah, it's like the first results that AI is providing you, and you think it's amazing, and then just like deploying it, and then it's not amazing, because like your competitor is doing that, like the person who has like a small business is also doing, and I mentioned this in the post. So you tend to flatten like the outcome pretty much fast when you do that, rather than just have like a little bit of thinking behind it.
when you talk about AI slop, can you conceptualize that to the audience?
Yeah, so basically AI slop is, yeah, my understanding for that is delivering something that's it's quite crazy, and it sometimes doesn't make sense, or even it's something you think it's quite real, but it's not real, and everyone knows it's not real. So kind of like the massification of using AI without having an idea on how to use that. So that's the way is that AI is lot, but this can extend to, I don't know, like different usages of AI in general. But let's say the way like people are using in general, I think it's just like first level, and I understand that because it's just like it's still going on, like the whole evolution of that tool. So the more and more like we think about like how to use that, I think we will start like just like breaking these AIs lock a little bit. But for now, it's just like it's the same things all over the place, all over the internet. It's like small brands using like the same, let's say, prompts, and yeah, sometimes just like it's not that cool.
It's basically it's using the tool for the sake of using it without having
Yeah.
necessarily a purpose or an idea behind. It's just and also replicating a bunch. I've seen a bunch of this first person recording of animals speaking to the
Uh,
camera. I think this was everywhere. Like just different animals with different, and then there's also a lot of security camera footage where some bizarre things going on. And sometimes if you just look at a glance while scrolling, you just don't realize if it's true or not, right? But
yeah,
then it's something absurd happens. So yeah, it's just and we're in that era now. It's like the mimification of AI, basically, right? It's everywhere. The AI slop is everywhere.
exactly.
But just going a little bit more on practical terms, right? So when do you think AI is actually useful in a creative process, for example? How you integrating in your creative process? How do you do it to enhance your work, for example?
In general, the way I use AI is to be my sidekick on things. So of course, like I know a little bit of designs, so I could use that for design. I actually use like let's say Midjourney for presentations and stuff. But I think like the best way to use that is a sidekick. So imagine you have like any other tool available for you, like even like softwares. So you have to use that to kind of like express what you want. You have different, of course, like different levels of usage. So if let's say I have a very long copy to deliver, I'll probably use that to proofread or even like give me suggestions. But I think that's actually like the stage in my opinion. So ChatGPT and AI, they're like pretty good assistants and they're like named assistants, but they're not seniors. So even like when it comes like to the level of intelligence, so that's the way I face that. So they assist me on my job, but they're not like doing my job properly because not only like the tool is not well developed enough to do that, and I'm not saying like I'm developed, like I'm brainiac or stuff, but I think like we cannot trust like these tools to deliver something end to end, not yet at least. So that's the way I use that. But then I think like it expands like to other areas. So when I was a creative lead for my company here in Amsterdam, we use that even like for campaigns. So depending on like the concept you have, you need to use like Midjourney, you need to use the Adobe's AI image generators so to come up with the visuals for that. But then again, you have to have like a very solid idea first, even like the references, how, let's say if you designing like a print ad, let's say you have to understand, okay, the technique you want to use, like what's in there, like everything should be very well described and very clear to you, and then you use the machine and then start like refining and iterating that. So I think that's, for me, I think that's the best use. It's magical like in some ways to use those tools, but at the same time we should treat machines as machines and not like as humans, because yeah, they're not in the end.
Yeah, it's a tool, right? It's a
It's
it's
a
a
tool,
it's
exactly.
another tool. Just a little.
It's a nice tool. It's a nice tool. I think I didn't see like things like near AI since now, and it's so nice that you have like. And I also mentioned this in the post. It's so nice that we are like opening up like new ways for even like people outside of the industry to do things using AI. But at the same time, we have to regulate ourselves to, okay, let's make like a proper use and not just fall into these AI slop kind of thing. So we still need to be in command of things. So that's my whole point. Like not only like in the, let's say, in the ideation part, but also like the way the machine is kind of like using our data and etc. So we have to kind of like develop this mentality well, because yeah, otherwise it would just be like more slops coming around.
So, what advice would you give to smaller brands, for example, that have limited budgets, on how they can, use AI tools, but all at the same time don't dilute themselves, right?
Yeah, I think first of all, and I may sound repetitive, but I think it's you have to find your like visual and your tone of voice. So I think like for all the brands, and this is can be like kind of like a pain in the arse, but once you define like, okay, I want to sound like this, or I want to look like this, even if it's not like final, or at least you have like kind of like a vision for that. So that's the first point. So I'm like always defending the fact that you have to kind of like create some assumptions on what like your band should look like and should like sound like. So yeah, my experience is just like, okay, put up like a bunch of people in a room, discuss like the brand, discuss references, do mood boards, like involve like other people in the company to gather like perceptions, and then just come up with something that is more solid, and then you start like iterating that with AI. So okay, let's say I have a technology company and I want to sound, or at least I want to look like, I don't know, very technological, whatever. So you can have like some references in your head, so you can just compile those and then come up like with something that is more like next to your vision. And then you start like, okay, let's put this into action. So let's use like mid journey, let's use ChatGPT to create like icons, to create like imagery. So and then also like during this process you start like to realizing your prompts. So let's say I have like this prompt is looking best, like it's giving like best results, or like these kind of style matches best my brand. So when you have like this whole flow from the very first beginning to like the iteration itself, you have like a very good construction. You're not like overstepping end of the process, because you have like a clear uh let's say line for that, but also you just implementing AI, in my opinion, the best way possible. And then of course, like once you have all of that, you document these, you have like these available for the teams, and honestly you can just use like forever basically. So like as long like these tools are like evolving, you can also like evolve the style, and you can even change if you want to. So for me, that's the best configuration, and I saw this working very, very well with this company I worked for. But also like I've seen like other companies doing this. There's one company I would like to mention is Supersite. So they are a company that has like a pool of freelancers to make them available like worldwide. And recently they did like this new brand style, and the whole brand style, like the whole imagery is AI. So, but the way they do that is very unique, because it almost feels like it's not AI. You know, it's AI, but they're like refining that thing so much, and they create like a very unique style. You think it's photographed, is like videographed, but in fact they had like a good idea like of the brand they would like to have, and it start like iterating that. And also like they explain like the whole process. So let's say if you put like the prompt like this, you have these images, but okay, we don't like these images because this and that, and then like here's how to refine it until you have the final result. So it's quite nice. As I mentioned, like I think like all small brands and medium brands are now being able to access the same tools, but like we as a brands, we should differentiate ourselves like from the rest by how much craft and how much like uniqueness we put like into this process to make something that is very original, rather than something that is like the first, second, or third like option the tool is giving to us. So I think, yeah, I think these brands, when it comes like to mid size and small size, I think it's one of the things. One of the things I've honestly been seeing like quite a lot, especially on social media, which is small brands kind of like repeating like patterns. So let's say you have like a brand, like a cosmetic brand, and then you have to do like these dark posts on Instagram. So you see like these styles being repeated over and over, which for me is quite sad because yeah, my understanding that if you have like a small brand or like a medium brand, you have to stand out and not to kind of like conform with the rest of the industry. So I think like this is one of the things. Honestly, I don't think like I don't see like people exploring AI very much in terms of like okay, instead of like repeating a style or like repeating a way of writing something, they're just like yeah, give me like that brand style. I want to replicate that because I have to put out like 100 ads for Instagram and see like what performs best. So I think the logic is quite distorted nowadays. And if you find like a good flow and a good framework to use AI, I think you can come up with something that is very unique and original. But yeah, unfortunately, by the fact that most of these brands want to grow fast and not like being sustainable, sometimes it feels to me there's just like repeating like the patterns over and over.
So I guess it becomes also one of the, you know, the a necessity for agencies or for professionals, for creative professionals, that you kind of, the same way as you, basically we spend our whole careers like teaching people the importance of doing like creative advertising to differentiate yourself, this kind of stuff.
Yep.
It's the same now. And how do you use AI, right? So it's another tool that comes into the mix, and it paints this picture that everything can be done now, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean you should, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't mean that's the right way. And then I think one of the things that you pointed out that I wanted to bring it back to it is that if you're trying to define your brand or your branding direction, then you would start by, you know, putting the right people in a room, discussing which direction, how do you want to look, how do you want to sound, and then after that, once you have a clear idea, then you can use AI basically, right, to help you get there. Let's
Yeah.
say more on a brainstorm basis, and maybe once you define that, using people, right, using human
Yeah.
brains, human creativity, then you can do basically use AI to execute, because then you know if it's on brand or not, and then you can basically take decisions if the output is good or bad. Does that
Yeah.
sound right to you?
Yeah, no, it does sound right. And also, I just want to add one thing, which is by the fact that we are more and more like relying on machines, we're kind of like forgetting how valuable like the human experiences are. So, for instance, like, and this is something I truly like see that's living abroad, which is sometimes you're in a room with, let's say, you have like a Brazilian, an Italian, a German person, Chinese, and then you have like so much like color in into their experience, right? Because they are coming like from different parts of the world, so they have like different perspectives of things. I'm not saying you have to embrace like every single idea and just come up with something that is just a mix of those, but sometimes it's nice to explore like these different ways of seeing life or different ways of seeing a brief, because that can give you like a good insight for you to just play around. So I think, yeah, I think more and more like we're, I don't know, like I maybe like this feels like that Simpsons meme where like the grandpa is like yelling at the cloud. But I think the more and more like we're just like overlooking these kind of stuff, like the human aspects of life, and just like relying more and more on the tools. And yeah, I think it also like feels that we're like losing like a built-inness part of it, which is having like meaningful conversations with people and gathering like cool insights from different perspectives and then just coming up with something that is more unique and natural. And I honestly think that yeah, we're like discussing about like AI, not only like the AI usage, but also like regulations. So I really hope that we can come back to that part at least and to say, okay, let's set up something like we have a tool, but we still trust ourselves into the process. We're still like trusting our guts. We're still trusting our like inner like tone of voice, let's say, or like the way we see life. Even though like it's sometimes this is a very unique standpoint, but still sometimes you have like the way, let's say, I see a certain subject is probably like the way you see that, although like we're both Brazilians. But um the more and more we can connect like with like these experiences and apply that to what we're doing, I think that's the whole beauty of that. And yeah, I just hope that we can have that like forever, basically.
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense what you said, and I love working with different cultures as well, and because you learn so much, right? People come with different cultural backgrounds, they come with different experiences, they different ways of interpreting the same thing because they have cultural biases, which is good. And if we're trying to come up with a solution for a problem or a creative a creative approach, the more perspectives you can put it together, the better the outcome will be because you will probably connect different things that have never been connected before because you're exploring these points of views from two parts of the globe, right? So I
Yeah.
find it fascinating. I love it. But just I'm just trying to be a bit mindful with the time. I think we're
Mhm.
approaching the end, so I want to shift to the future thinking, and just ask you two last questions in regards to where do you see us going in that direction, right? Things are
Okay.
moving fast, especially in the AI scene, right? So let's imagine it's possible to replicate like the perfect campaign, totally using not necessarily ChatGPT, but all these AI tools. Maybe in a few years, we're moving so fast. Maybe next year that will be already possible, right?
Yeah.
Perfect campaign. You don't tell if it's not that is AI generated.
Mhm.
How do you see? Where do you create? Where do you actually create differentiation? Then how to differentiate your brand?
I'll just mention again my work, but I think it all comes down to the core message or or the concept. So yeah, I think like if you're bringing just like something that is almost like undebatable, like a truth that you think like, yeah, this is so real that also happens to me, or like if you're like exploring the product in a way that's people kind of like know it's true, but like twisting a little bit to make it more fun or to make it more interesting, or like if you get them by surprise, or even if you do something that will make people share that. I think that's the thing. Like I think like you can replicate again the thing that ChatGPT did in 1 year, 2 years, maybe even less. But I think like maybe, and this is just like a maybe, I don't think you can replicate, or at least you can like do that. The AI will come up with that concept. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I think that's the main thing. Like for me, honestly, I think the execution goes like both ways. So from a branding perspective, you can of course do something that there's a very nice beautiful like 35 millimeter film, etc. But if you don't have like a message behind it, so if you don't have like a core concept behind it, it was just like an execution and people just scroll down. So, and I think like the best way I can exemplify this is nowadays, like again, not sure if it's nowadays, but with these POVs videos. So I'm not sure if you see, like if you watch this like as much as I do, but I think there's like something fascinating about these videos, which is oftentimes like it's just like a person with a camera with no props, with no scenario, with no everything. And then like you just kind of like get transported to that situation somehow, because the way like the person is doing that is so convincing that you're like, yeah, this is crazy. First, I think it's very like hilarious the way you're doing that, but also like it doesn't involve like any kind of production. So for me that's the like the most like primitive like way of explaining this core message of concept thing, because then again it's not something like millionaire when it comes to production. But also I think, yeah, I think going down with the message as well, I think we should maybe just look at the past and think about the industry as a whole, and think about like the way we're using like technology across the time. So I just remember like this morning about Toy Story. Yeah, I was very young when Toy Story came out, but I remember that, of course, like the whole technology of like doing like a full 3D movie was amazing. It was like unreal for that time. But of course, like you can mention that it's not technology, like which is like kind of like giving you a good feeling, but it's just like the story, right? So the story is very complete. It's super nice. You can tell that story probably like in a couple other ways, but I think one thing is complementary to the other. So the 3D is quite nice because you're playing around with a story that is happening like in a bedroom of a kid. But I think like the story is just amazing, and you could, I don't know, like you could replicate like the technique of Toy Story, but you cannot come up with that story, you know. So you cannot come up with the script, or you cannot come up, I mean, like from scratch, like asking ChatGPT to do that, because for instance, like this thing of like, let's say like the child that thinks that their like toys have like a life. So this is pretty much like unique. So I think that's the way I think with this too. So we have to be mindful about like telling like a good story first, and using like the tools to execute, rather than just thinking that the tool will just do like both parts, because it won't. Or at least if you ask like ChatGPT to do both, it's just like a plain story, because again, ChatGPT is not like living a life. They're just like replicating patterns. So I think that's the way I see that. So the more and more like these technologies will evolve, I think the more and more brands will need like someone to tell good stories rather than using the tool, like per se. So that's the way I see the future. So I think telling good stories will become like more and more important.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So just to wrap up, what advice would you give to a junior copywriter today that wants to start using AI in the creative process?
I think, especially like for new people, I think like this person probably hasn't have a voice, right? So I think it's important for you to really focus on your craft, and to understand that, okay, I don't have like these distinctiveness in my voice, and or like in my way of writing or my way of approaching those things. So I have to guarantee that I have that before everything. So, and this is like you can of course use those tools to do that, but I think it all comes down to create your own taste on things. So you have to read quite a lot. Yeah, reading English, reading Portuguese, reading whatever language you're like native. You have to watch so much things like inside of advertising, outside of advertising, because you have to kind of like refine what's the best and what's not the best for you, and then just work that. So you would just put out like some shitty work quite a lot. Don't worry about that. It all goes part of the process. And once you start doing that, you start like looking back and to say, okay, this is not like serving me. This is not like my tone of voice. I'm just going towards like this direction. So the more and more I start refining that, listen to feedbacks. I think it's also important for junior copywriters, because yeah, people are doing like therapy sessions with ChatGPT. So you can imagine that maybe they're not into like hearing like old people, and just play cool, because then again, I think like these tools are like here to serve us and not like to replace us. And then the more and more like you define like what's the best and what's not the best, and use the tools like currently, I think you become like a great professional. And yeah, there's no secrets actually, like to become like a good professional. It's just like trial and error, like accepting that you like fail most of the times, and then at some point you would just fail less, I guess.
Awesome. I think it's a great way to end. Thanks. It was an awesome conversation, and I had a really good time.
Cool. Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me. And yeah, let's
Yep.
keep in touch.